Mental illness in Shakespeare's works. William Shakespeare, the English poet and playwright, is regarded as being the greatest and most influential writer in the English language. As well as being praised for his incredible work created throughout the 16th and 17th century, he is also regarded to have mastered the art of minute observation in human beings. Many of the characters in Shakespeare's tragedies displayed the symptoms and behaviors of those affected by mental illness and would likely be diagnosed with a psychiatric or neurological condition. Many of Shakespeare's characters fit very well into the categories of the DSM-4. The DSM is a series of handbooks that psychiatrists and other medical professionals use to diagnose mental illnesses. Although mental disorders were not classified in his time, it is likely that Shakespeare was aware of the existence of these illnesses. Before exploring the theme of mental health and mental illness in Shakespeare's works, it is important to understand how mental health was perceived and treated in Shakespeare's time. In the early 1600s, those who were mentally ill were treated as if they were zoo animals. They were placed into asylums where organized tours would be held in order for people to see them for their own entertainment. People with schizophrenia, epilepsy, Down syndrome, and other neurological and psychiatric disorders in the 17th century were placed into these asylums. However, if you were fortunate enough to be able to afford private treatment, you would be put into what was known as a private madhouse. The clergy worked and operated a majority of psychiatric treatment facilities. Things like hallucinations were believed to have been caused by demonic possessions or witchcraft and were treated with exorcisms. Religious-based treatment continued throughout the 18th century. King Lear and age-related dementia. In earlier times, people understood that many who aged began to act childish or even crazy, but this was known as second childishness, not the disease we all know today as dementia. King Lear is a tragedy written by Shakespeare that depicts the aging and gradual descent into madness of the main character. The story is about the King of Britain who wants to retire from his position. He decides to divide up his kingdom into 3 parts, one for each of his 3 daughters to rule. King Lear's dignity and seriousness rapidly decline, and he eventually goes completely mad. Some of the symptoms of dementia include irritability, disorientation, confusion, psychosis, as well as personality and behavior changes. These are just some of the signs of Lewy body dementia that King Lear shows throughout this play. It is safe to assume that King Lear would be diagnosed with Lewy body dementia if he existed in this time. Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. PTSD. Lady Macbeth is the wife of Macbeth in this tragic play by William Shakespeare. Lady Macbeth and her husband both ruthlessly kill those that are close to them in order for them to become the King and Queen of Scotland after receiving a prediction from a group of witches saying that they would. Near the end of the play, both Lady Macbeth and her husband show the symptoms of PTSD. Post-traumatic stress disorder is a mental illness that is affected by those who have suffered from one or more traumatic events. Lady Macbeth talks Macbeth into killing the King of Scotland at the time. They then proceed to kill his friend, Banquo, who is told by the witches that his descendants would become kings. Macbeth is crowned king, but his excitement is accompanied by hallucinations of Banquo and feelings of going mad. Lady Macbeth continues to relive the horror of helping kill the king and Banquo. She also sleepwalks. Abnormal sleep behavior can be linked to the traumatic memory of Banquo's murder. Symptoms of PTSD include vivid nightmares, reoccurring and unsettling thoughts of the event, abnormal sleep behavior, and psychosis. It is very possible that after planning the death of the king and Banquo, they were both left with post-traumatic stress disorder. In conclusion, when taking a closer look at some of William Shakespeare's work, it is evident that Shakespeare's understanding of human behavior is one of the reasons that he is regarded as such an influential and imperative contributor to English literature and the English language. His knowledge of the behaviors and acts of the mentally ill gave audiences a different and more interesting form of entertainment.